What are some of the dumbest tax moves that I see business owners make before year's end? A lot of business owners have an unreasonable fear of the IRS. And the reason that I say that is they're usually operating from a place of fear, not knowledge, when they make statements like, I don't want to pay any taxes. I get crushed in taxes every year. Sometimes there's reality to that, but a lot of times when I peel back the onion, so to speak, and look at what is actually happening, most of the time, business owners who have this like irrational fear of the IRS really haven't planned and they just got surprised. And they feel like it's the IRS's fault for their surprise, but in reality, they're just not planning correctly for how to not feel so overwhelmed by the IRS. So, what do I mean when I say people make dumb moves before year's end? Well, if you're a business owner, you know that I talk about how it's so important to plan and understand your numbers because then that helps you guide what good decision making looks like. And before year's end, I have this, I've seen this happen so many times. Um, I have seen people who, in reality, aren't even making enough income in their business to be terribly concerned with it. And if they knew that, they wouldn't go rush out and buy something by year's end. And so we see this a lot, right? So everybody who's kind of making money in business thinks, I need to go buy some big piece of equipment before year's end. You're going to see the videos right now popping up telling you to go buy a G-Wagon and, buy that big year end purchase and all the things, right? And everybody, all the salespeople are out telling you how you can use 179 to write off your asset. I love salespeople that double as tax professionals. That's sarcastic. Like, really get a professional opinion here before you believe these people. But, a lot of people think, well, I made money, and the only way that I can not pay any taxes is by going and buying some big piece of equipment or a car or something they just really don't need. And the other thing is sometimes not only do they not need it in their business, they actually didn't even need it for a proper write off because the income in the business was either not as high as they thought it was, or they had already done enough other things where their income was zero or even below zero. And now they've spent money that they probably didn't have on buying something that does zero for them in a tax world. What do I mean by that? Well, most of the time, if you're a small business owner and you have good books and financials, you should know how much money, reasonably speaking, you're earning throughout the year. So if it's the fourth quarter of the year, you should look at the first three quarters and you can reasonably expect that you can, estimate how much more money you're going to earn if you're staying at the same pace during the last 3 months of the year. So you've got 3 quarters of history and you're like, hey, I'm in the fourth quarter. How much is it? And then you can take that income, translate it into your tax projection and look and say, well, believe it or not, given all these other factors that go into running a tax projection, your spouse's income, your other income, if this is a side hustle, your investment income, your real estate income, if you're on Social Security, that income, your dividends, like all of these different things play a part. And you look at that and you say, okay, here's how much I've actually earned. This is how much I'm going to end up paying taxes on. And looking at that number, maybe you might be pleasantly surprised that the income that you had perceived in your brain is not either as high as you thought. In which case, why are you then going to buy an asset? Why are you going to throw in this big asset? And a lot of times people finance this. So why are you going to go spend money you don't have? And Dave Ramsey always says to impress people who don't even like you, to go buy something when in reality you didn't even need to, because either your taxes are already covered for the year or the amount of taxes that you're paying incrementally is so low that you're ending up overspending on the asset and oftentimes putting yourself in debt instead of just looking at whether or not that makes sense. I mean, if you can get your total taxes to, I know there's people that say they pay zero taxes, and there are, But those are not the norm. There are a lot of people who strategically pay far less in taxes than if they, would have not planned. But the whole I pay no taxes thing, under the hood, most people do. Everybody likes to sensationalize the big examples and billionaires and hate on them and all that. A lot of people do, right? They just know how to plan so that incremental part of their taxes is not like the biggest expense they have. And so that's where the planning comes into play. And so if I have somebody who's a brand new or young small business owner and effectively is only going to end up paying like less than 10% in effective tax, we should be thinking long and hard about whether we should just pay the tax instead of going and buying some big piece of equipment that we probably just don't need. It's going to put us in debt. It's going to offset our cash flow. Like these are all factors that should be considered instead of just saying, you know what, I'm so scared of taxes that I have to buy something before year's end. That is operating out of fear. And the way I like to teach business owners is to operate out of knowledge. Okay. And where does the knowledge come from? That it comes from actually knowing your numbers. It comes from a plan. And I know not everybody loves to make a plan, and some of us like to fly by the seat of our pants. But believe me, this matters because there is so much more in our control than we believe sometimes. And this is something that is in your control. We do know where your numbers have been. We can track it appropriately and be current on what we look at. We can make a projection and a plan for the current year. You don't have to operate out of fear of the IRS and hating how much money you're going to have to pay in taxes if you have a clear-eyed understanding and plan of what it looks like. So if you're a business owner who is just gut reacting and thinking, I need to go buy something before year's end because it's the only option I have to not pay taxes, let's take a look at whether that's the case from a reality perspective. Don't let fear run the day here. Look at this in reality, understand your numbers and how much you're actually going to end up paying out of pocket in taxes if you don't buy that thing, and then make a decision. I'd rather you make a decision out of knowledge than out of fear.